Is Terry gonna be on the session on this one too? Or?
I believe so.
Same.
Like in live?
So I did go through this exercise.
It's 4 o'clock now, 1:36. No, we still got four without her too.
That's okay. Hello, sir. How are you? Great to see you. Dave Sharma, Director of Design and Construction.
Yes. So, yeah, they gave me the lowdown yesterday, and I finally, like I said, I've heard some stuff before, but they're like piecemeal. And now I understand, okay,
What was the issue?
like transportation taken over here, and the facility is going to where they issue the hopscotch and what we're looking for.
Studio is on our way here, but go ahead and get started.
That's how I describe it. We gotta build
No, that'll do it.
the existing transportation.
Yeah, if it's not denied, whenever.
I'll text you.
All right, gentlemen.
You ready?
Oh, that's sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sit along.
All right, it's 4 o'clock. We're gonna get this facilities workshop started. Terry is not gonna be WebEx. She can be coming in personally, but we do have 3 board members, which constitutes 4. So, Dr. Pace.
All right, thank you, Mr. Melendez and members of the board. We have with us today Mr. Clinch and Mr. Sharma to give you an update on facilities, particularly starting to look at some of these exciting K-8 projects coming up. The not so exciting news is what's happening in terms of escalation with project costs, but
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pace. Yes,
Work's fault.
I'll take,
Explain why.
it's not my fault. Yeah, we continue to monitor cost escalation very closely, and also logistics, because it's a challenge to get materials out on our sites. But, you know, we're continuing to look ahead and plan as best we can. So we have 5 items to present today, and we are actually going to be looking for approvals for items 2 and 3 for the program verification phase, which would allow us to go into our production design.
it's not action, just consensus.
And really what that means is program verification at a high level. Dr. Pace, myself, Dr. Allen, and our team, we worked with our design team to identify the overall objectives, the overall arching objectives for the project, so that when we in turn meet with the stakeholders, then we have that those guidelines have been, those parameters have been set for the project. The other item that we're going to brief you on, the first item, is our general contractor bid recommendation. So board members, you indicated a interest in finding ways to bolster local vendor participation. So we believe that this speaks to this, and it also provides us options in how we can procure projects. At current, for those projects that are $2 million or less, we only have 2 mechanisms: the trade vendor bid and the continuing CM. So this would establish something kind of in the middle, no more than $280,000. The statute is $300,000, but we'd hold it at $280,000 so that we have some safety factor built in. But before I continue, I also want to make some introductions of some guests that we have in the audience today. From Ziskovich Architects, we have Mr. Ed Napier. And Ed is here representing the K8CC Sunbridge area. And then from Schenkel Schultz Architects, we have Patrick Rausch and David Torbert. And they are here representing the Sunbridge K8CC. So let us move to, this is our agenda. So we will now move to our first item for the continuing contractor bid recommendation. Mr. Sharma, I'll let you take us through.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Mr. Clinch mentioned, currently, me stepping into this role 3 months ago, starting to look at how we can efficiently execute projects, I realized that we might have had a gap based on my previous experience. And so we started looking at how we would go about contracting for some of our smaller projects. So currently the district uses, we have a specialized term vendors, which is just the plumbing, drywall, electrical guy. And so anything beyond that, above the $300,000 range, we would have to use a continuing services construction manager, which would typically mean that we would have to pay GRs and GCs to oversee those jobs, and then a fee for them to manage those subcontractors and coordinate those jobs. So the GC contracts, the general contractor contract, basically would allow us to hire one vendor that oversees all that coordination. And just as an example, I use the project that we have a need for right now at the Center for Employee Health. And it's just reworking an existing room, adding a door, removing some millwork, plumbing, and just upgrading that room, lighting, and small HVAC work. And what you would find is that we would have to hire a different vendor. And the current, we came up with an estimate about $120,000. So right now what we would have to do is go and hire a drywall, millwork guy, a security system, a door, electrical data. And then in effect what happens is that our project managers and facilities would end up becoming the general contractor. We would have to coordinate the stud wall guy. We would stop and say, bring the electrical guy and bring the plumbing in. And so what you would inadvertently find is that there would be gaps, because obviously our guys are not.
They're not there exhaustively, they're not there full-time.
They're not sitting there all the time, and so they're depending on subcontractors to go out there. So a GC bid, in effect, would allow us to identify one vendor that oversees, that coordinate all of those trades and make sure that we get a job. It also reduces the risk on a district, because we can, if you say this wall and we need outlets here, then everything associated with that wall would be there. So you're expecting them to carry the studs, the drywall, the painting, the finishing, and all that, rather than there would be, well, I never had painting covered because I'm just a drywall guy, which we've ran into in the past. So the state currently, state statute allows school districts, they make, this is allowed. I've used this in the past in other school districts. And so they have it broken out by categories. And what they require is that any jobs over $35,000 would have to be competitively bid and come in with a seal bid. And that is pretty much the avenue for general contractor, a general contractor term service contract. So the next slide pretty much has the recommendations that we're proposing to you. Is and we've worked through this, by the way, with our procurement department exhaustively and our maintenance department, because they use these contracts as well. So we are proposing to implement a sealed bidding system where the lowest qualified bidder is awarded the job. The way that I've seen this work in other school districts is that you end up having a mentor-protege relationship develop, where a GC that can bond a $300,000-$400,000 job allows a plumber to do more work, and then their bonding capacity goes up, whereas that GC's bonding capacity is going up as well. And so you would find that the more experienced firm tends to mentor the less experienced one, and they would both develop as they can go on and become continuing services construction managers eventually. And we've seen that successfully in my previous job. So that increased bonding capacity will allow them obviously to move from one step to the next. And then obviously what we did look at is our term vendors that we have right now, and these are all local. Most of them are local vendors within Osceola County. 11 of them have a general contractor a license, but they're actually just doing plumbing or they're doing drywall, because that's how we put out the contracts.
But as a GC, they can do the multiple works under their license.
They have the licenses available, but our contract was very specific to our individual trades. We can absolutely implement a local business requirement for the selection of these contractors. We've talked this through with our procurement department.
I thought there were some state statutes against that.
It's the way you go about doing it, I think.
Okay.
So in the selection process,
And what we're recommending complies with all the statutes.
You can score local contractors within. Well, the definition of local, I think, is what the state technically defined what local is. Yes.
And I'm gonna get to the punchline a little before Dave, but and that's another reason why we cap it at 280. Florida statute is 300,000 to ensure that we stay below that threshold set by the state.
Because as long as you get over that $300,000, you're required to use a construction manager to oversee that project. And so we have those continuing services construction managers happening. What this would, effectively do for us is, like that pharmacy project, we would be able to pull the trigger on it really quickly. Instead of doing multiple site visits, we'll do one site visit with the general contractors. It would be an all-encompassing scope, so we would do one purchase order to that person, one project manager overseeing it. So in effect, what you're having is efficiency, less paperwork, and you're still getting a successful project. Yeah, well, there is a higher chance of you getting a more successful project because you're covering all your bases here. The scope gaps, one of the big risks that I saw here was that when our project managers take on the role of pretty much coordinating those jobs, you're inadvertently going to have scope gaps. And, I would hate to have to come back and ask for more money because we didn't see something like that. But we're taking the risk here. And so currently we have 36 projects, active projects, just in facilities that are just below that $280,000. And they have multiple scopes that we could have potentially used this contract to do. So in effect, I think it would be a good tool that we can use in multiple departments. Mr. Cavani and I have talked about this extensively, and we've spoken with procurement and Sarah about it as well, that we think is going to benefit the district overall and reduce our risk. And what you're finding happening is that we're having a lot of these projects now coming on board because of how fast we're growing. This would really improve the timeline on when we can deliver those projects versus when we have to go out to the individual vendors to do it.
So we just need a head
You
nod.
need a
You
head
guys
nod?
are-
Yeah.
Mark,
Yeah.
you're good, that's all you know? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm just a little bit confused in that, okay, if something's less than 280, what project is less than 280 that's not involving one trade? Like, I can say, hey, you're hiring a plumber, but then the part that got me confused is, okay, a plumber can be less than 280, but you're talking about you also want a project manager. Are we hiring a plumber plus a project manager?
No.
These are
That
for
was confusing.
projects that have multiple trades within them, so it's in addition to plumbing. There are currently 36 projects where we have multiple trades.
Okay.
So at current, we have two options. The trade vendor, which is really intended for one trade,
Right.
and then the continuing CM. So, we don't want to pay
So you're talking
all
about like
those
combining the
markups.
three trades together into one contract?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay,
In a
now
sense,
I was just trying to understand.
that's
the
what the
GC
general, I
is
apologize,
responsible for
Mr.
those
Melendez,
three.
but that's what the
Okay.
general contractor
So they
does.
said the plumbing estimate is 60,000, whatever estimate is 20,000, the electrical is 80.
He would
So the
hide-
combined project total is 280.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Not the individual
No,
services
no,
280.
no.
Because then
Right.
you get into that issue, it's okay, 280 times 3 is really not.
Correct, right, no, so it is that one contractor, general contractor, managing multiple trades and they are responsible, one point of contact that's coordinating all of those subcontractors to do the work.
And then when we hire that general contractor, are they then required then to use the trades that are in our trade system?
So there is a
Or-
there can be a preference, yes. So typically you would find GCs that are doing work for the school district, they would ask you, hey, I need your plumber's list or I need your electrical list, because those are people that know how to pull the permits.
Right.
They've already been JLA badged, and so it's much easier for the GCs to use those rather than going from the outside, because we have our JLA requirements and stuff that needs to be met for all subcontractors. So yes, they would typically get a preference.
Okay. All right, just to understand.
No, we
No,
appreciate it.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay, all right.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
well,
Good
great.
job.
Well, thank you so much for that. Now we'll move on to our K-8 updates. We're going to start with BB, Knightsbridge area.
So I think the better thing to do would have been put the site plan in front, in the first slide, so I apologize.
There we go.
This page is just the data, but there is a site plan here that shows the Knightsbridge BB site plan that we've reviewed and looked for all options. We've looked at multiple options. So at this point, we have program verification that's complete. This is a 3-story prototype. And we've gone through what's called a densifying exercise, for lack of a better term. Based on what we're seeing in the market currently, and you're going to see slides later on that reviews market conditions currently in construction, commercial construction. We've gone through a densifying exercise, which pretty much means that our architects went back to the board and they've really looked at every single space, every corridor. We've looked at cutting out jogs in the building. So you're going to see these buildings are, it's fairly symmetrical when you look at the edges. So they've cut as much square footage as we can out of these buildings to get us to 142,000 square foot for the Knightsbridge site. It still carries 1,451 student stations, and our task is to keep the cost per student station below, which is when these projects land, is going to be $28,277. Now, there are many things that I can do. That one seems to be the hardest one to pull off, keeping the cost per student station below. That is going to be the challenge as we get into market conditions. You'll
Where's
see
the
why.
water retention? Because a wetlands isn't the same as a pond. I don't
No, sir.
understand-
So when we negotiated these sites, we negotiated retentions to be off-site with the developer. So we're pretty much just piping the water off.
So it's a master stormwater system that we're discharging into.
What that does is it reduces the amount of acreage that we would actually have to buy as a school district to put those sites on.
And also, if you may recall, in October, I presented on several sites that are coming up that have Army Corps DEP permitting. And this was one of them, in that it had the 5 wetlands. And, my concern, given that that responsibility for permit review is being transferred from the Army Corps to DEP, well, this particular site avoids all 5 of those wetlands, so that we can, eliminate the need, going through the timeline associated with the DEP permitting,
Right.
which is very questionable right now. There is still nothing moving.
Right.
Permits are being submitted, but nothing is being reviewed or issued at this time.
Well, one thing I want to give you kudos, because the board's always quick to criticize, but I see the parent stacking is, yes, it's off the spine road completely, even if it backs up, because they can always do zigzags in the parking lot.
Correct.
Now, is the space between parking lots big enough if they want to do that? Because I think at Michigan Avenue, they have that, where,
Yes.
like, somebody can drive and like pull out at the same time.
Yes, we do.
This
And
is
in
designed-
fact, the last time we had presented Celebration Island, that was a comment in that we were providing 11%. We increased Celebration Island to 20%, and we're now increasing our other sites to at least 20% on site stacking.
So I like that, how they even have the egress there, and then they merge them together, so this is classic, this is the way it's supposed to be done. So I just want to let you know that, and I really appreciate whoever designed it.
Patrick's shaking his head.
Single
So,
shots.
All right, Shingles also, but I give you kudos, it is, that's exactly what we're talking about, not putting it straight on the main road, put it on a spine road, and then why do the bus loop first? I mean, don't do it first, and, I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be done, so I appreciate it. Good.
Yeah, and also, this is the site that has the affordable housing adjacent to it. So we continue in discussions with the county to come to joint use of our athletic amenities.
So you see that
That's the
right
joint
here,
use
the little
park.
corner up here?
Mhm.
That either we might sell to the county and let them put in a park, or we might work to partner with them on that particular piece.
And so I'll just wrap this up. Well, it's pretty much bad news on the budget, so it might be better if I just tell you. So there's a little, if you notice, the little restroom pavilion is being deliberately put out there so that in the event we do get to that joint use, we can separate the school facilities from that park, and that way people don't really have to access the building. So we've been planning ahead for that. So.
Yeah, and depending on costs, we could even, stub future utilities for that future restroom building, so that's an option as well. We believe that we should have the restroom given the distance back to the classrooms, to the main building.
Now, is that 20% all just material costs, or how much of that was scope change and that we've changed something?
That
So-
20% is.
So there's 20% is
Overall.
pretty much market escalation across the board, and I'll get into that, Mr. Melendez, as soon as we get through the 2 K8s. But you'll see where we are with material pricing alone. So we build prototypical K8s because we've built these before. Correct me if I'm wrong here. This is West Side, similar to West Side.
Yes,
So-
it's the component from West Side.
The components from West Side that were merged in order to give us the site plan that we need. So in terms of what we're building material-wise, the kind of roofing that we're using, building tilt wall construction, all of that remains prototypical. So there, in terms of what we're adding to the project, not much.
'Cause the other thing I was thinking about too, where's like the playground? Because it's K, you got kindergartners, usually they're on the first floor. So you want some kind of ability for them to have like
Yeah.
a playground.
And those would be located close to the elementary wing. And then we also have included the 2 classrooms for VPK. So we would have that on the ground floor in close proximity to those classrooms.
And I know it's not
I'm
so,
just trying
it's
to,
not,
yeah,
it's not, it's
I'm
not
looking
so
at the
much
overlay, I'm
of
looking at
a-
the map, and I'm
This
figuring
is
out,
not-
okay,
this
I know
is
it's
not-
not exactly the scale either.
And it's not fully developed. So this is just to show the overall program of what we, have captured into the project. And we have captured
'Cause
all the
ideally-
minimum requirements for the program.
So just to let you know, because if this may be a joint use facility, I don't know what's north, east, southwest.
North is usually the top.
But I'm looking at the map here, on the right side, if the kindergarten playground can be there with the perimeter fence, so that if there is joint use facilities, we don't get any potential cross mixing of
Right.
the population for
And
security
that's
purposes.
something we can absolutely do.
Yes.
No,
Go
this
back
is
to.
not, it's not applicable to this, but it's just been a thorn in my, under my saddle since I've been here. Like at Harmony High School, the courtyard is nothing but just a sea of concrete, and when you kids are out there and there's no air, it is hot. When I say it's hot, it's hot. There's no trees, there's no landscape, and I've been noticing that on a lot of campuses. So as we move forward into these, I sure would be nice to incorporate more landscaping, more trees, more places where they can, because a lot of kids are going to eat outside. Not necessarily at this level, but I'm thinking on the larger schools.
Well, and that's a very good point, Mr. Bass. I've worked with Mr. Cavaney's team in grounds, so we've developed design guidelines that we want to standardize the kind of trees that we do, because certain trees have a long-term maintenance
I know.
attached to it.
I know that's why you
At
don't
least you
do
guys are
it.
talking to each other. It's
We
We don't like palm trees.
I know,
High
but
maintenance.
But we do have design guidelines, and so hopefully,
Or St.
yes.
Augustine grass.
I mean, and the good part is that our designers are here. We have landscape architects on those, and so we can absolutely look at incorporating trees that are low maintenance and provide the shade for us. Absolutely.
please do that, because it's awful in some of these schools.
So when we designed, when we originally developed the budget for this project, which was 2019, 18.
It was late 2018.
So we had an original project budget of about $42 million, and that encompasses everything: construction, design, material testing, all the other things, FF&E, all the other things that we'll do. So this is an estimated increase, and I want to tell you that I think that this increase is going to be off, because we did this based on design development estimates that we got when we got drawings from our architects. And we don't have a construction manager. We're currently selecting one to look at this. But we just took bids on Gateway and Celebration Island, so we'll have a better idea of cost per square foot data as we go forward. But we're looking beyond a 20.5% increase on a project budget, with a construction budget that's now more in line with our budget, our original total project budget that we were looking for. And again, the reason we put this here is because we will get into a market update session just after this.
So this is a snapshot in time as where we are today. These K-8s don't go out to bid until October, November. So we're going to continue to monitor market conditions and make our adjustments accordingly. Okay, and on to our next K-8, CC, Sunbridge. And this is the Ziskovich design. We'll go straight to that site plan.
So for Sunbridge, we have completed the program verification again. We've worked with Dr. Allen to finalize what programs we would need in these. We've gone through the densifying exercise here again, where we cut out all the extra square footage, or any square footage that we could cut out. It wasn't extra, it's just square footage that we could have gotten down to minimum performance. So we're down to 142,358 square feet. We have 1,476 student stations. And again, these two projects, both Sunbridge and Knightsbridge, are looking to land at the same time, so the cost per student station would be the same when we're buying them.
Did Sunbridge have architectural standards that differed from other places? Because I know they Tavistock is.
they're like
They
celebration.
do,
requiring-
but for the most part, that's being handled by Tavistock. We have that easement agreement for hardscape, landscape, irrigation, and I believe that comes to the board tonight. That's on the agenda tonight. So that
It's an-
primarily addresses those specific standards.
Correct, yes, sir. And we, again, Mr. Clinch mentioned, we are having monthly meetings with Tavistock to update them and to gather information from them. Our agreement says that they don't really get to dictate anything, but we have to share the information with them.
Okay, so there won't be any substantial changes other than what you've got.
Nothing that we will be tied to, sir.
Yeah, not for development standards now.
Is this a 3-story building also?
It is.
Yeah, there's our portions, which is the classroom portion, would be 3-story.
And what's that separate? I'm sorry, I'm getting over.
That's the gymnasium.
No, that's fine, and that's a very good question. So this one has the gymnasium separate. The Schenker Show's prototype, the gym is attached to the building, but with the Ziskovich prototype.
So, and here's the reason why we wanted to add the gym connected to the main building, is because that will likely be added to the shelter list. In addition to doing the redundant IT hub at that location at Knightsbridge, it will reside on the shelter list. So we wanted something that we could get to the gym during a storm event without the additional coverings, awnings, and that type of thing.
So they'll have like a little hallway or something like that.
There'll be canopy connecting the two.
Right,
Oh, canopy, not an
there'll be a
actual
covered
building.
canopy, right. So with Sunbridge, it also will likely end up on the shelter list because of its proximity, evacuating from the coast with the new connection to Sunbridge Parkway. But with Knightsbridge, it is definitely, going to be on the shelter list and viewed as a very important facility during storm events because of the functionality for the redundant IT hub.
Mark, catching up on redundant IT hub I just provided, I apologize, is that where servers are going to be, like our backup servers?
Correct. Those are backup servers in the event that the main servers here at the district office go down, so that we will have continued IT capabilities.
So that's backing up the entire infrastructure
That's
for the school
backing up.
district?
Correct. Right, and there'll be a small generator that will become part of this, it helps us to get synergy with the EHPA for the Enhanced Hurricane Protected Assembly, so that we can put this on the shelter
And that's
list.
gonna be at Knightsbridge?
Yes, that's Knightsbridge, where the
Knightsbridge.
gymnasium is connected to the building. Correct. And, another reason, I don't know if Mr. Shater is in the room, but another reason why it was selected is because of its location to other neighboring hospitals, law enforcement, that type of thing.
Yeah, they'll both end up on the shelter list.
Right.
Mr.
But-
Litton is adamant to increase the capacity of shelters throughout.
Do we get like a special grant from the county for that? I mean, we get shelter identification, do we get shelter money?
No.
Give us some of that shelter money.
The way it's written into the state statute, we don't really have much choice.
Mark, is that?
But can we ask the county, like we always do Olay, can we ask the county, hey, these are designated shelters? Can we ask the county for some extra funding piece for
There
that?
have been a couple of grants that have allowed us to go back and add generators. For example, we added a generator at Harmony High School, and also, where was the second generator project? It was Harmony?
Liberty and KOS.
Liberty and KMS, and those came through a grant fund in order to help support the development of shelters with those equipments already
Yeah.
there. Because in the past, sometimes when we saw a hurricane coming, we had to contract out. We would get reimbursed through FEMA money, but contract out to bring a generator on site, get it hooked up, all that kind of stuff. So now these places have the generator that basically you just flip the switch in the event of a shelter
There's an automatic
situation.
Yeah,
transfer switch.
because there's grants I know we can get from the state, I'm just talking about go to the county, when they do their budget, just like how we did, hey, we need a baseball field, we need whatever, let's go to them and say, hey, we got a couple of schools coming online, they're hardening, we just straight up ask.
We'll have to look at how the statute reads in terms of what our requirements are. That's probably funded entity, but certainly we can look at that.
Is residential development abutting right up to the school site?
On
On
Sunbridge
Sunbridge?
to the north
I know
and
that's
east side. So to the south, there is a retention pond,
Okay,
and then to the east is the South Florida Water Management District Canal.
okay.
But
So
it's all fully fenced, 6-foot fence.
our lighting, are those, I assume those would be lighted fields or no?
No,
They
we
wouldn't be,
do
would
not
they?
light our
You don't
fields
need-
for K-8.
Okay.
It's gonna be a soccer field with a 6-lane running track, which is our standard for middle school and, for K-8s, for K-8s. Now, we are also in discussions with Tavistock to form a partnership for joint use of amenities. And in this case, we may be able to
I
provide
may pay for
some
lights.
additional amenities for them, and that's a possibility.
I'm
that
just
we can
thinking
work
lighting,
on.
because I know how residential neighborhoods are when you get lighting up against we ran into that out here at Toho.
Right,
Yeah, we
the
have to shield
athletic
them.
lighting does
Yeah.
have special requirements, so you're not spilling it off onto the property.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Those buffers, and I had a meeting with Dr. Pace yesterday,
We talked about that, Mr. Melendez, you were ahead of the game.
But there are some
Mr.
exciting
Vasquez, he's on the
opportunities
same
as we
wavelength.
continue to our discussions with Tavistock.
But the good thing about it though, because we were talking about it somewhere else, is that this hasn't been built yet. So when the school hasn't been built, do you still allow space for like some kind of easement for buffers, whether that's a sound buffer? Because the high school probably they're a little bit cheerier, rowdier than elementary school. I don't know. It depends on the full capacity. But you know what I mean. So when we design these schools, abutting, or at least adjacent to a residential community, do we leave a little buffer zone to put something up?
But if it's gonna be a joint use potentially, that opens up another whole series
Yes.
of issues.
Right.
You
Well,
plan for that.
Typically our noise challenges are with high school football stadiums. And, that's not the case. This is gonna be occasional weekend use by the community. If
Now,
we're able to get to a partnership.
Now, here's one more thing, and I hate to delay this, but this is a workshop that's appropriate. Just today, we're talking about how we need more portables, we need whatever. This layout, I'm looking at Knightsbridge, there's space to just in case we have to put a wing. This thing looks like every square inch is like, bam, there's no room for growth, there's no room for error, there's no room for.
Actually, with
anything.
Sunbridge, there would be the ability to add a wing in this corner. We're hoping that that's not the case. We see that area being used for gardening and part of the E-STEM curriculum. Also, we have programmed in future portables, and you can see the little boxes next to the running track.
And here's another issue where I'm kind of
5.
going with that too. Knightsbridge wasn't a development of like a significance. We knew it was coming. We purchased it individually. It wasn't dedicated through a developer, right? We just
Right.
identified the property, paid for it.
Right.
This was dedicated because the development was coming.
Right.
So maybe when I see this, I'm thinking maybe the dedication standard isn't appropriate. So let's say they're dedicating like 20 acres. We might have to start looking at maybe doing 22, 23 for breathing room, because to get what you want, everything is so stacked up on each other. Maybe we're not having a proper standard of how much acreage we need to properly develop a K8. Because it says very little expense. Again, look at Knightsbridge. We can do a whole bunch of stuff. And like I said, we're doing 16 portables at Narcoossee. We ain't doing no 16 portables here. You know what I mean? So
What is the acreage? What's the footprint on this? How many
This
acres?
is 20 acres.
20 acres. And 20 acres looks tight because we're always talking about stacking and we're getting cute with stacking here. I'm just saying, this is a workshop. And I don't want a definitive answer, but just something to consider. Maybe 20 acres isn't enough when we start doing future dedications.
Right, well, this whole area, this is future expansion here. And again, we're hoping we can enter into a partnership with Tavistock, so we do have that open property there to
So
do something with.
what more Mr. Clinch is getting at, Mr. Melendez, on our typical K8s, they only get a running track with this. They don't get softball, baseball fields or anything that are shown here. These are all shown because of that agreement.
See what would fit.
Because of that agreement. with
Oh, I see what
Tavistock.
you're saying, because Sunbridge wanted it as an amenity to the community.
That is correct, yes, sir.
So if that amenity to the community wasn't in existence,
We would have had this entire area here. Being clear, we could potentially would have shifted the track over and then left the space in between the school and the track
Where are you seeing
for a
it?
future.
Oh, over here?
yeah, this part
Yeah,
here.
all
So it
this
says
to
this is
the
the
east
normal
and
K
to the left.
prototype.
Our-
And this is a Sunbridge because they're specifically.
Correct,
asking
so if
for
you
it.
notice the school before, we didn't show a baseball field or softball field on it because we don't build those on K8s.
Oh, okay. You're learning, see, the whole
Yeah,
purpose of the workshop
Just
is
the
learning
6-lane
about-
running track, the soccer field, and the hardball courts.
Okay.
And the gymnasium.
So
That's all we
so
do
if it
for
wasn't
athletic
joint
activities.
use, we wouldn't be doing that.
That
And
space
would be
would,
the
that
extra
full space
there.
wouldn't be
Correct.
shown as that, yes,
This,
sir.
this area here.
To show you, to give you a little bit of a heads up on, no, go ahead.
Yeah, right. We are potentially looking, same thing with Knightsbridge, doing a separate restroom building. Now, depending on where we're at with the partnership, if that doesn't come to fruition, we would likely stuff the utilities so that we could do that in the future.
You said there was room for expansion, you said somewhere.
Sorry, right, this area where the wing should have, sort of is missing, this school kind of just ended off in that
Okay.
area.
Thank you. Do you know what the capacity for those is? How many additional student stations can we build on that?
At current, we're showing 4 portables on this site, so that would be 100 student stations. But we have the opportunity or the ability to add a wing on this west end of the
Ah, so
building
that's just a
here.
square with nothing in it.
Correct,
Okay, so that could
Right.
potentially be.
right.
Okay.
3 stories as well.
No,
No.
Because then you get parking issues too.
Possible that we could
go 3 stories, but being that close to the edge, we probably would.
too. Yeah.
Gotcha. Ron just got a question.
I think that's about 10,000 square feet.
You know what the future is like.
Well, so we gotta remember that our prototype is 1,415. So what I'm starting to hear is this desire to possibly increase the size of our prototype. And that's
No.
what I.
Not for me,
No.
not for me.
So while I understand everybody's dislike for portables, what we have to remember is we do have to have a certain number of students and portables across the district as a whole
Expand.
to support the reason we need to build a new school. So as much as we don't like seeing these portables
Gotcha.
right now, Narcoossee is very unique, and that's because St. Cloud did not embrace the 4 charter schools that came online. So while we love knowing our students wanted to stay with us inside of our schools, it kind of created that excessive growth at Narcoossee. So had they gone to the charter schools as everybody had anticipated, the
It
growth
wouldn't
at
have been.
Narcoossee would be working just fine, and Sunburst would be coming on at perfect timing and everything would gel. But because they chose to stay with us, which is what we prefer, we kind of got this excessive growth at Narcoossee. So I just want to make sure the intent isn't to grow our K-8 prototype to 1,800 and try to get away
Not
with
for me.
portables. We always will need a certain number of students in our portables. Then through redistricting, we built your new school. So I need to make sure that Jason and I are hearing the right thing, because especially when we're getting ready to do our ed plan survey, we've already brought the prototypes to the board and we did not increase it, but if what I'm hearing is we need to bring it back to increase it,
No.
then this would be the time to do it before we approve our ed plan survey in the next 45 days.
Now, the only other issue, and just a sidebar, because I'm going down that rabbit hole, and I apologize, I don't want to go too far. But theoretically speaking, too, a K-8 is a K-8 until it could potentially split. In other words, like if a development gets really large, just like what happened with Narcoossee, Harmony, what are the contingency plans at these if it needs to split?
Well, we're negotiating future sites with Tavistock. We actually have another one that another K-8 site that we've started discussions. But as far as taking a K-8 and splitting it, then there's the whole potty parity, the height of water closets and that type of thing that you get into. It's not easily done. It's not a one size fits all.
Right, but you know what I'm saying, like Sunbridge is such a large community, they gave us 3 school sites, for instance. All 3 of them were allocated to be K-8s. So that means like technically none of them can split, because you ain't gonna get another lands. There's not gonna be 20 acres left, because they're gonna wanna develop the whole thing. So then you're gonna get stuck, so what's our contingency plan
Ron
for that?
is answering your question, and I want to hear what you.
Well, and I don't, if it's a K-8, you're accommodating grades K through 8. In our case, we have the 2 VPKs. So you are providing that flexibility. This is one of the most flexible prototypes because it's the K-8. Whereas, it's not as efficient if you have a middle school and looking to split it. Does that answer the question or help?
Not really.
Ron is asking, Ron is wanting to say
So when
something.
we're doing the student generation rates as these communities come online, we're sticking with what we see as the board's preference of going with K-8s over elementaries and middles. So usually their breakout is 2/3, 1/3. So it's 2/3 elementary, it's 1/3 6 through 8. So they have a tendency to work. Due to their size, you would only convert them to middle schools, because we've tried 1,100 elementaries and we went back down to the 900. I don't see these converting to elementary and then having 1,400 elementary students inside. So right now, based on what we've been doing, historically it's working that we're properly placing our K-8s in the right place. Should we start generating a higher level of elementary for a while? You tweak the attendance zone boundary, you would send all them back to Narcoossee and Narcoossee Middle. So we still have our traditional K-5s and middle schools out there, but most of these communities are building that they support the K-8 environment. We build them with the intent that 80% come from the developer and we reserve 20% to come from the outside through choice, the employees, the teachers, etc.
And that's where you have the flexibility to rezone them out. So rather than splitting the school up, but I guess, Harmony, I guess, then why did we split up the other ones, just out of curiosity then? Was there just like a different time frame, or?
Well, Narcoossee we split up because it was serving in the entire RPC community. And its K-8 just grew to a point, Mr. Phillips isn't here, but my one got up to 1900. So at that point, we just said, make a full-size middle school, make a full-size elementary school, because it was serving so much more than a single development. It was.
Oh, yeah, that was the hodgepodge one that we're talking about. It wasn't one big development. A whole bunch of people kept going underneath the number.
Right. And then Harmony Community, that turned into a K-8 for the RPG Gallagher Charter School, and it was a promise to absorb those students until we generated enough students to open up the middle school.
It was always
So it was
intended to
always
have
intended
three
to go
schools,
back
an
K-5.
elementary, middle, and high school.
From the very beginning.
Mhm.
Okay.
Rhonda, where's the transition from Sunbridge to Center Lake DRI? Is there much of a gap between the two? Center Lake, the DRI that's going in, and then Sunbridge, is there a marriage line or is there a transition between those two?
Center Lake's gonna run you up to about Jack Brack Jones, and then everything north of that, but then Sunbridge kind of they go across and they kind of start coming down, and then they'll get pretty close to Center Lake, and then Center Lake.
Have we
will open
gotten
up.
school sites in Center Lake yet, or is it too early?
Oh, no, it's
already got-
there, it's been approved, it's been annexed by the city of St. Cloud, it moved several times before all three parties were happy that that is a done site. It'll probably come available somewhere between 3 and 10 years, we're hoping sooner than later. But, and then 2 for Sunbridge.
Gotcha,
Will
okay.
also be coming in, and then we have 1 at Triple H. And then, of course, we'll start acquiring K-8s and high schools inside of the whole mixed D5 and 6. So we have our eyes on a lot. And then we also have the Long Bridge, which is off of the country. That one's been on the books for quite a while, so there's a K-8 in that development as well. So
Do we still own that property in, near Gramercy?
Old Hickory.
Old
Yes.
Hickory?
That is 15 acres, so we can do it forward with it. And we can
Gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take away.
No, it's good. That's the whole purpose, and I can't believe that. All right, well, I guess we're good with
Anything
something
else on Sunbridge?
The budget, a similar story as the Knightsbridge site, and we will be asking for another board workshop and April 8 to review. We're looking at 2 other projects, but more in line with real market conditions that we take bids with as well.
We should have bid openings for Celebration Isle and Gateway by then, so we will have information to bring you about exactly what escalation is doing. So we would like to request to add a board workshop for facilities on April 8th at 4 o'clock. And then I'll
April
also
5th.
want, April 5th, sorry. And then I'll also want to request an executive session because we'll know exactly where our budget stands and we'll need direction for further negotiations with our unions.
But just as my personal opinion, as far as the increase in cost,
Agreed.
since we're getting extra impact fees, I don't want to value engineer yet. Let some of the extra impact fees that we weren't forecasting, because at the budget workshop, we just said, hey, we have to evaluate it up. Let's use some of those savings before I cut down the school. I mean, it's like, now if there's something simple we can value engineer, yes. I don't want to take out something nice yet. You know what I mean? If we have the impact fee dollars, use it.
Oh,
You know what I
The
mean?
key piece is,
I wanted to have a good school. I don't want to cut it down to the bare bones
Well,
yet.
I don't think I could have said it better, Mr. Melendez, because I don't, as a construction professional, the term value engineering doesn't mean much to me, because value engineering to me means I'm getting something of equal performance at a cheaper price, and that pretty much doesn't exist. It means we're cutting scope, which is not ideal, so I'm with you.
Yeah, so I'm not ready yet to cut scope yet.
But nevertheless, as we take these projects forward, typically during our GMP negotiation phase, that last time you see the project before it goes into construction, like we've done in the past with the Den Johns, the Michigan Avenues, we will identify various options, kind of an a la carte, and there may be 15 items, and the board comes to the consensus that we gotta have these 10. These are required. These 5, let's talk about these further to see if we can remove that scope from the project. Or shelve it, do it at a future date.
Okay.
Okay, we'll keep it
Right,
moving.
yes, sir. So
Market conditions.
So as we transition into market conditions, it directly ties into some of the conversations we've been having on budget. So the graph you're looking at is a graph that's put out by the Associated General Contractors of America. It's an association that tracks market conditions. So rather than tracking individual items like steel or drywall or something like that. They take it all in and they use it as a construction index. And so you can see what happened from like mid 2019 all the way to December of 2021. Now this shows some leveling out, but we've been getting updated numbers since we prepared this budget, and that graph keeps climbing. Now, this little dip that you saw towards the end of 2020 is no longer heading in that direction. So, just a very high level, that graph translates into steel products, from 2020 to 2021. In 2020, it went up 5.2%, but in 2021, steel mill products went up 127%. Plastics went up 34%. Aluminum, which we use for canopies and stuff like that, went up 30%. And as you go down, you can see all of those. I'm not going to go through those with you, but the big one that I wanted to point out was diesel fuel, 55%, but we know over the past week that that's probably doubled. And so that has a direct impact on our construction costs, even though we don't really report it often, because all the trucks that we bring and fill with, that we require generators, and we're getting concrete mixes and all that, everything drives on diesel. And so that is going to have a significant impact as we build going forward.
Yeah, Dr. Pace, in our budget earlier, because that's like when we hire a contractor to do it.
Yes,
But I know we buy our own fuel for our own fleet. Do we negotiate, like, what I understood was like we have like a negotiated agreement with somebody, like we lock in the price for like 6 months or something. How long is the price locking for what we buy?
We don't pay the state tax
I
either.
don't believe we locked in price before like that. That idea of
Sign
buying
the contract.
fuel, not been in existence since 2008 or 9. Harvey and I were just discussing this yesterday. Our next delivery is gonna cost us.
I don't think.
Can we lock in? I mean, because I like that, because maybe before you didn't want to
We're
lock
not
in.
gonna have a
but can we-
supplier that's gonna sign that contract.
Too late.
You're just not gonna find a supplier that's gonna sign
Because
it.
that's how old I am. I remember we used to always lock them in. That's my institutional knowledge of board. We used to, where the prices went down or up, we locked in, and sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but I was guaranteed to win. But
The good news is we always carry a supply, that will last us through, so we're okay this week, but boy, next week, it's not, when we get back from spring break,
Right.
that next delivery is gonna cost.
all right, sorry.
And so the next graph that you're looking at on slide 16 is the change in pricing for non-residential construction inputs versus the bid pricing. So what I wanted to point out, the red graph is what the materials are going to cost. Those are the inputs. But what you see in the blue line is what the bid pricing has been. Well, some contractors were already bought out on projects, and so they were eating that markup. But as we go out for new projects right now, I expect a sharp increase in that blue line, where it's going to come to match that red line, so that they are going to try to recoup those costs as they go in for new bids. And that's evident as we're seeing pricing coming in for Celebration Island, for Gateway, those schools. And again, listen, it's not just those alone. I mean, when we go out for just adding an outlet, or for just replacing a ceiling or some lighting, you're seeing those costs come in. Looking at just adding a piece of canopy, it's going to be 6 months out. We contracted for the roof with our construction manager for that building next door, Building 2000. Well, they've got the NTP, but they're going to start construction in October because they can't find the fasteners to hold down the roofing material, because it has a 6 to 8 month lead time. But there is a slide on that, so I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
So is that, I'm sorry, Ms. Castillo, did you have something?
I did not.
Is that where because I always heard, what was the CM at risk for? Is that what the
That
CM
is
at
their
risk is? That's the loss, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
they're locked in, but these Knightsbridge and Sunbridge, we haven't even started the contract yet, so they're not locked in.
Once
So,
they sign contracts, once they sign their subs up.
so
then
Purdo's
they're
stuck,
locked in.
Purdo's stuck on Gateway, right?
Well, they don't
So
have a
like-
contract yet, they're taking
No.
bids now. So we still have to negotiate it.
With
Oh, I was
bid
gonna
opening-
say-
Bid opening was today at 2 p.m.
Okay, but whenever they do bid, they're then locked in. That's what the CM, I was wondering, what
That
are
is
they
the
at risk
at risk.
for? They're
Yes,
just
sir.
paying for everything and then.
They would have to guarantee price escalations, if there are gaps in their bids, where one of their subcontractors, again, this is very similar to the GC discussion we had before. If there are gaps in where a subcontractor was missed or something at their fault because they're the CM at risk, they're going to have to pick that up. And let's say they missed the aluminum canopy. Well, tough luck. It's in our drawings, and that's the contract you signed for these drawings. You have to go put those canopies. So that's the risk that they're taking,
Right,
and they charge you for that risk.
right. Okay. Gotcha.
So the next slide you're looking at, slide 17, is more for local market conditions. One of our contractors, Williams Company, they're the ones that are going to be building Celebration Island. These are figures that come out from them monthly, and so they have been seeing a 17% hike in concrete, 55% on rebar, 73% on steel and drywall. But this data is as of December, so I'm expecting January, February, you're going to see that these prices are climbing now because we're having a shortage and the pricing is just from the suppliers is going higher.
Well, and this last part,
Sorry, my bad.
the billing index, this shows the volume of projects that are designed. So this gives a good indication of what's going to come to us in construction. So as you can see, anytime that we're above 50, that means that we are already very busy. So at this last reading,
It's 1121.
yeah, we are 58. I don't have my glasses.
55.8.
Thank you. So that means that we have a lot of construction that's going to be hitting and saturating the market.
So the graph on slide 18 that you're looking at is just one that shows lead times for specific items that we would use. So, fire pumps are 2 months out. If you look at, let's just say switches and panel boards are 3 and 3.5 months. Roofing materials at 7.6 months. That's the second longest lead time item. So the ramifications for us here is when we're building a school, we put up the walls. The next thing we put up is the roof. Then we put up the windows and the doors so that we can dry in that building, so that we can start building out the inside. Well, the bad part here for our schedules is that if we can't build those roofs in time, it's suddenly going to have a schedule impact on our projects.
There was another thing that came up, I'm sorry. You first, Ted.
So, I wasn't able to hear very well, obviously, because I was in my office when we were doing our previous workshop, but one of the questions that I think it was Mr. Melendez was asking about schools coming online on time. And yes, everybody said yes, they're not going to be delayed, but it could be based on lead times and all of this stuff that I'm seeing.
It's requiring our CMs to really look ahead. And we've had multiple discussions with our CMs. Our CMs going forward for the Celebration Island that we're going to talk about further our next workshop, and also the Gateway Comprehensive, they have a great plan how they're looking ahead to ensure that they're not going to be delayed. And if there are delays that come into play, that they have a backup plan so that they can go to another source to get those same materials or similar materials.
So one of the things that we did with the 2K8s, the reason we said yes is because what you would find is schools are built in certain cycles. As you plan them, then you build them. And so we are out of cycle here because we have started the design process and these really early. And we did that so that we can buy out these projects early enough so that we can accommodate those lead times and still land these projects. So our cycle is a little bit early here, and that's why we were comfortable saying yes. But we did want to show you those risks that are associated because these are outside of our control.
But to your point, Chairman Castillo, we have to continually be looking ahead. And any indication that we're going to have a challenge with not getting materials on time, we need to be ready to pull the fire alarm and go to option B.
I don't know if this is a question for you or for the next time we have our other workshop that talks about market conditions, but is this standard from now on, or is there some pressures,
Yeah,
the
this is
COVID-19?
right. This is as a result of COVID-19, which brought about the logistical challenges. The logistical supply chain is on demand. Well, when all of these supplies are depleted, ships are not able to get into the ports, then this creates this backup. So oftentimes material suppliers carry only the material on site that they believe they're going to need. So they didn't have these massive stockpiles of plywood or steel joists before COVID. So as a result of COVID and those supply chain challenges, those materials were depleted. Like for example, our interior wood doors last summer, that we had significant challenges with getting so that we could complete and open our Canoe Creek K8. We didn't anticipate these things, but they were as a result of COVID. Another, factor that played into the marketplace, Amazon decided to build distribution facilities everywhere. They bought up every single bar joist, such that a lot of designers had to change their designs from bar joists to structural steel so that they could keep their projects going. So it's a matter of looking ahead, planning ahead, and having a backup plan.
So we already surpassed the bottleneck. The bottleneck was the on-demand piece. We have a lot more projects that are now coming online because we're over the COVID-19
Yes.
pandemic, and we believe that the bottleneck we're at the end of it.
So I would like to tell you yes, but everything that I've read, all the research that I've done is no one's sure because there are still multiple factors at play. Now suddenly we have an issue with fuel that just escalated what we were looking at.
With our luck, you know what we're gonna have? Major hurricane. That's gonna be our next big hurdle.
I'm like the little
Please
kid.
don't say
I'm
that.
just telling you, that's what's gonna happen. Knock on wood, that's
We're
what
never
happened.
working on the board, we don't even.
So there isn't a right answer for you here, but all indications are this is not going to be solved in the short term.
Right, okay, so not in the short term, so that means that these figures need to be in our budget for projects now.
Yes,
They are
and
good. They
that's
are-
where this
yes, ma'am.
escalation
They
Which is
will.
why we try to increase the impact fees as much as we
They
could.
will be
They don't
coming
like
to
us
you
for
in
doing
budget
that,
amendment, yes.
Okay,
Correct.
budget amendments.
For existing projects, and as we build new projects going forward and new projects are coming online, we are taking these factors into consideration and planning them, and the budgets are.
Right, that's what I was getting at.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, we need to start adding these conditions into the budgets that you're asking for new projects.
That's
And,
correct.
and in some instances, what we're gonna do is carry these potential risks as alternates. So in the event that that risk comes to fruition, we'll have the dollars there to accommodate that, to address it. But if the risk does not come to fruition, then, that's project money that's returned to the school district.
Right, so that's where I was getting to, because oftentimes with most of our projects, you ask for a budget, we approve it, and then you give us back a bunch of money. This is probably not gonna
The
happen.
reverse is gonna happen.
Oh, don't tell me that. No. I'll accept not taking any money back, but I ain't giving you no more money. No, I'm kidding.
I won't be able to build
But,
the
but
school
also
system.
keep in
No.
mind that the costs are
Yeah.
gonna be, it's gonna be what the market will bear. So, as hard as we're negotiating, it's based on that lowest responsive bid. We're competitively bidding all these components of work, so at the end of the day, it's what the market will bear.
One question I have is, I was with Dr. Pace this morning and we're doing a security study on an app and everything. These cell phone signals, there are no cell phones, because I found out that the DAS radios are not the same as cell phone signal.
They're not.
So the DAS is a completely different network.
Public safety.
Are we building these new schools where you can actually use a cell phone inside of the building?
So,
Or is
Well,
that gonna be a part of it? Are we
so
gonna
that
do
we
Wi-Fi
can-
extenders?
So
and-
we can,
'cause-
we can have a functional DAS. We don't really address the
so
cell.
I can answer that
'Cause
question
that
for
is-
you, Mr. Melendez. That's, so I've looked into that before. Every cell phone carrier have their own system. And so pretty much what you would have to do in order to get full cell phone coverage is that every carrier would have to put a DAS into that building, or you would have to build a DAS and allow them to attach to it. That just becomes very complicated. Now, I haven't seen a school district that's ever willing to take that on, because now suddenly you have a third party that has a part on your building. But just based on how we build schools and the requirements that we have to meet, we're going to do tilt wall, we're going to do lightweight insulating concrete and decks. That is pretty much building a box. With the amount of infrastructure that we put in the walls now for the Wi-Fi, for the smart boards, and all that stuff, what you're pretty much forming is a Faraday cage that just blocks outside signal out. And so you are going to have cell phone communication problems in these schools.
Can you build enough Wi-Fi capacity for everybody to use Wi-Fi calling?
Well, one of the things, sir, is that personal cell phones don't go on the school's Wi-Fi. Only district-approved cell phones, and so that's another challenge that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, but a district cell phone's Wi-Fi capable.
They are. I have one, and I have one, and it does work. Yes, sir.
Because then maybe that's a way around it, is to maybe just have these Wi-Fi access points that beam out a stronger signal, so that way.
We'll definitely invite Mr. Thorne into the conversation.
Okay,
I don't want
Mr.
to speak
Chair?
for Mr. Thorne, but I believe that capability exists now. we've talked about it for a couple of schools recently. I don't want to speak, I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I guess we'll talk about that later in a separate one, maybe if Mr. Thorne can because that is gonna be a serious
IT
issue.
workshop.
Okay,
All right.
moving on.
So, slide 19. I gave you the bad news for
Yeah, give me some
materials.
good news. Give me something good here. You know?
This is on labor shortage in Central Florida.
Okay.
For my first board workshop, so please don't hold it against me.
I see the gray hairs creeping in already.
Believe me, they've grown, and I've come with all good intentions. So I looked at, we did an analysis in the market. Our competitors are residential contractors, and so we were tracking permits as they housing permits just within Osceola County, and so you can see a significant rise in the 21-22 year. And this is within our school year, so we have. Last year we were at 8,000 for the entire year, and we're already at 5,560. So what that does is that, last year, countrywide, we had non-residential construction jobs opening, totaling probably about 273,000. That's a 30% increase. The talent is moving into residential construction, and so what we're seeing is that our contractors, in order to bring talent back, our construction managers are now having to raise salaries, and so they're raising those between 6 and 7% in order to attract the good HVAC contractors. Because the lowest bidder sometimes is great as a government entity to tell you that that's what we want, but that doesn't necessarily give you the best product. I mean, I think we can all agree on that, and so you're going to see a direct impact on our cost to build schools as our contractors are going to go out there trying to get the best team to build those schools. Sorry. So my next slide is slide 20, and I think this brings home the entire discussion. So what you're looking at is the same contractor building an elementary prototype over multiple years. And so what they tracked here is that I got the slide from one of our contractors that's going to do a Gateway High School. And so you're looking at the same elementary prototype not the same elementary prototype, but they were tracking the cost per square foot that they were buying out these projects at. And so you're seeing where that's heading. And as you can see where that yellow line is on the bottom part of the slide is at $200 a square foot. Well, we've passed that. And I mean, 2-3 years ago, if you'd asked me, I would say that we might never pass $200 a square foot for commercial construction. So I've been looking at the preliminary numbers coming in for Celebration Island. And I told Mr. Clinch on the way over here, it's closer to $300 a square foot.
$300?
And that's an elementary school that doesn't have very expensive, the kitchen cafeteria is expensive stuff, but it doesn't have an auditorium, doesn't have a gymnasium. So when you factor those type of amenities in,
We're
like
seeing
for a
that
K
list
or
on
a
that
high
one,
school,
right?
then that
We
square
are,
foot
but we haven't
cost
bought it out
goes
yet.
up even higher.
We're taking bids, so they're giving us their preliminary
Is
numbers.
the state gonna factor this into their cost per student station requirements?
Great question.
That is-
So I speak with my counterpart at least bi-weekly, and I'm always asking him, what's going on with cost per student station? Are the indexes going to be revised? Because it is very difficult to hit our cost per student station, and his response continues to be, good luck.
Does your organization have a lobbyist that can?
Yeah, we used to have Pico back in the day. Pico doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
we
Yeah,
no
that's
longer have those funds. Keep in mind too that cost per student station must be met if you are using state funds. So, the saving grace is we are using locally generated funds. So we could apply for a waiver, but we don't want to do that. We want to continue to drive to cost per student station compliance. That's why we're doing these densifying exercises and all these above and beyond strategies so that we can attempt to hit cost per student station.
Bottom line, it's gonna be next to impossible.
Couldn't have said that better, Mr. Thacker,
Say-
because I've already ran the numbers in my head. I mean, we're on Celebration Island, we're probably gonna have to cut $500-600 per student station in order to be able to meet that. And that's next to impossible for us to build a school with that.
As a board, I don't think we're gonna wanna give up what we have to give up to do that.
Well, I don't know much that you can give up to get that kind of a cut.
Sit them on top of each other,
Yeah,
sort of stack the
exactly.
chairs within the floors.
Right, this team has done a great job working in partnership with our architects on densifying these buildings, which I think makes sense just in the long run. Over time, it's a more efficient building to operate. But we're not gonna cut what kids need in order for it to be.
We just have to do a report to the state and say, hey, we didn't make it, and so what?
We're not gonna give up
so
yet.
what, I mean.
We're not gonna
Right,
give up yet.
and what we're going to do between now and when we come to you on April 5th is a really in-depth exercise at looking at everything that we absolutely need, making sure that it's standardized to meet equity across the district, and then come to you with options where we are truly with the bids that we have and what's our bottom line number, and then potential options.
So
Can we
you
get all
can,
this savings out of the architects?
Yes, sir.
So just as a reminder, Ms. Castillo, I know we are gonna request a facilities workshop on April the 5th, and Mark would like it at 3 instead of 4. And then also an executive session following the meeting to discuss labor negotiations, once we have our budget from the state.
so, and, you know, as Dave mentioned, as part of that, we're gonna break out this GMP so that we can show those options.
If
They
it just
may
gets to
not
be
be
audited or
options.
something
You
like
may
that, we have to
think,
be
you know,
able
if there,
to
again, if there's,
substantiate it.
you know,
Getting rid of
15.
bathrooms is not an option.
Right, well, and, I mean, we're gonna look at it as subjectively as we can to see what could possibly be removed, but you, as a board, you may say, no, we absolutely have to have these things, so. But we're gonna provide all the
You
options,
know,
we're
we're
gonna
not
put them
long
all in
range
the
for
table.
every district in the state.
Yeah,
in the
this isn't
nation.
an Osceola
This-
County
this
problem.
It is not.
No,
This is
no,
every-
it's
It is
state.
not. I mean, our architects are working. Our architects are working across the
For
board.
what it's worth, we have a school, an elementary school that's essentially the same size as Celebration Isle in the middle from Ball County, and the prices are coming in exactly the same. With you all are seeing, it's statewide.
So, Mark, you mentioned that we could apply for a waiver. Those
Yeah.
are not terms I know because we've never had to do that in my tenure. So can you walk me through what that means and what the
It's a
implications
separate
are?
form that's submitted with your cost of construction report. So that on an annual basis, we're required to submit our cost of construction reports for each of our major projects. And the waiver form is submitted as part of that. As part of that waiver, we would have to submit why we're requesting the waiver. In our case, you know, one of the reasons could be because it's locally generated funds.
But we can explain in that waiver, why is it that we are over the cost per construction? And I mean, this is the
Every
data,
district.
this is the data right
Every-
here. And
yes.
so it's across the board. It's, yeah, as an owner, we're not gonna have much choice but to do something like that. So my very last page is just ending with some good news. So we have multiple RFPs out there that, you know, and I'm doing this just for a plug, cause, you know, it's a public meeting, but we need bidders to come on board. We are picking our construction managers, so we've scheduled for the two K8s. Ponciana High School network cabling is also out on the street, as well as our continuing services roofing contracts for design is also out on the street. And then we're going to follow up with our transportation facilities, the Healthy Way, Oxa Bus Road, and West Side K8 Kitchen serving line renovations. So we are pushing, we are doing CCNAs for these. A few of these, once we're able to adjust to the $4 million, would step back as we go forward. You wouldn't see as many as these, but just the major projects.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, this concludes our work.
Kimberly, that's why.
Any questions?
No,
Thank you, David Moore, great
you did a good job. Thank you so much.
How you doing? Hey, good job, man. I know you had your first board workshop there on the fire, man, with some not so
Sorry,
great
I
news.
was looking at him
No,
spilling
he
it
was
until he got
checking
here.
me.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
No worries.
No, that's
He was very particular about.
They don't need it, you went into bed, and then I'll.
I will do that.
For your access.
Okay, thank you.